Welcome back to this video lecture. We will discuss SQL injection now. Before going to start, let's talk about what is data, why we are securing data from the database. Data is one of the most important components of information systems. Database-powered web applications are used by the organization to get data from customers. SQL is the acronym for Structured Query Language. It is used to retrieve and manipulate data in the database. Now you can get some information about database. A database is an organized collection of data stored and accessed electronically. Let's look at SQL. SQL is a domain-specific language used in the programming and designed for managing data held in a relational database management system or for stream processing in a relational data stream management system. Now question arises is what is SQL injection? SQL injection is an attack that poisons dynamic SQL statements to comment out certain parts of statement or appending a condition that will always be true. It takes advantage of the design flaws in poorly designed web applications to exploit SQL statements to execute malicious SQL code. Let's look at how SQL injection works. Assume that here is one attacker and SQL vulnerable website. The types of attacker that can be performed using SQL injection depending on the type of the database engine. The attack works on a dynamic statement is a statement that is generated at runtime using parameters, password from a web form or URI query string. Assume that this http abc.com !id equals to id parameter has SQL vulnerability. First, attackers finds vulnerable pages with different payloads. Once he finds the vulnerability, modify, delete data, whatever he wants. Nowadays, there are so many tools available for SQL exploitations. You can also exploit manually by using union statements and so on. Okay, that's it in this video lecture. Thank you for watching. See you in next lecture. Welcome to this video lecture. We will talk about how to find SQL injection vulnerabilities. SQL injections are one of the most popular server-side injection attacks. SQL injection attacker tries to inject SQL query as input, and if the web application is not sanitizing the user input, then query is being executed on the database. If the user query is successfully executed on the database, then the attacker can dump all the data from that database, so with the help of SQL injection. The attacker can insert, update, delete something from that remote database. SQL injection is of various types like error-based SQL injection, blind SQL injection, time-based and boolean-based SQL injection. Let's see how we can find SQL injection and inject SQL query inside the web applications to retrieve data. Let's open up BWAP web application. Now let me select SQL injection bug here. SQL injection post method. Here you can see that this page is vulnerable to SQL injection. Now the question arises is how we can find the SQL vulnerability. First we have to find error-based SQL injection. As you know that in the server side, SQL string is passed to a SQL server to execute the query. Commonly, every string begin and ended with the quotation mark or inverted comma, single or double. Let's find error-based SQL vulnerability. Let's search here. Film as random name. Here we can see that film is not found. Tap Iron Man. Film is found in the database. Let's check with double quote. Here you can see that there is no error is generated. This means double quote is not used in the SQL query string in the database. Let's try with single quote. Here we can see that error is generated. This page is single quote error based string. That's it. It's simple. Okay, in this lecture, it's all about SQL injection. Thank you for watching. See you in next class. Welcome to this video lecture. We will talk about how to find SQL injection vulnerability multiple ways. We have to start our OS OWASP broken web application. Here you can see that the OS broken up application is up and running. Before going to start, first ensure that your browser is configured with the Burp Suite. So let's start Bricks vulnerable web application, which comes inside OS OWASP broken web application. Here you will find the OS Bricks link. Just click over that. Let's go here and select as content pages. So here you can see there are total 6 content pages and all content pages are vulnerable to SQL injection. So content page 1 as the basics one. So let's open up content page 1. In the previous lecture, I have told you earlier that in this video lecture, I will cover error-based SQL injection, and in which we will dump the database through an SQL error. One thing, remember that before testing any application, we first have to find the logic behind that application and how the application is working and what kind of SQL queries are executing at the backend. Let us try to test with this application and with this page. So you will see that this page is showing the details of users like user ID is 0 and username as admin along with the user email. And here you will find a SQL query which is being used for retrieving user information. Bricks is a vulnerable web application. It is showing a SQL query which is executing at the backend, but when you will test the real-time web application like Google, Facebook, you will see nothing. If we look at the URL, here you will find an additional parameter called as ID and the value 0 is given to the user ID. Now let us try to give any integer values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Here you will see the response as error, that user doesn't exist. The first part of the finding a SQL injection is to fuzz the application. Now in your mind, one question arises is, what is the fuzzing? Fuzzing means giving an weird input to the web application so that we can able to break the SQL query which the SQL query is executing at the backend. I have given and long integer values and alphanumeric numbers, but we are not able to break the query. Now what we can do is, if I just write here id equals to 2, you will see over here that user details which has id 2 and much is looking at this query. Now we can understand that it's actually retrieving a data from the database whose id user is 2, right? Now in order to break the SQL query, in previous lecture I have explained the error-based SQL query. Let's try it once. Let's add a single code and see what happens. Here you will see that we are successfully able to break the SQL query. We get response as SQL error. Now let's look at what are the other ways to break the SQL queries. We can also add double quotes. Once again, we are able to break SQL query. Now instead of double quotes, we can add backslash. So backslash is used for escaping characters in MySQL. Here you can see that backslash also works. This means that this web application is vulnerable for single quote, double quote, and backslash will work depends upon the application logic. Because sometimes a single quote will work and double quote will not work sometimes, backslash will work, and both of them, single quote and double quote, will not work. The main thing is we have to find the application logic. This is how application work. That's it in this video lecture. We are continuing this in next lecture. Thank you. See you in next class.